and Lloyd Webber, welcome to all of you. Tony, I do want to start with you because you've been on the Hill, you've been talking to some of your deep, dark, secret sources. Tell us what you've learned about what Congress does or doesn't know about what's going on right now.
Well, the president may be getting daily briefings, but apparently no one in the Hill is. And I was talking to some not-so-secret sources, staffers, who have been involved in the oversight process, and there's no oversight process. So there's some really big questions which are being left unanswered relating to the appropriation process and the fact that there's been no money appropriated for the Libyan conflict. So no matter how you feel about it, right or left, Republican, Democrat, there's pretty clear indications that the Title 31 requirements of the Anti-Deficiencies Act are in violation. So it's kind of like one of those situations where maybe good news, maybe not, but Congress, who has the real responsibility for approving wars and overseeing them, is getting nothing from the Pentagon.
Now, Sam, naturally all our viewers are familiar with Title 31 of the Anti-Deficiency Act, I'm sure, but this is a 6-month kind of undeclared war, but big progress. Is it a surprise that Congress is in the dark, and is this good for Obama?
Well, look, I think from the very beginning, Congress has completely abdicated their role in all of this. I mean, they should have either authorized it or not. And frankly, President Obama should have gone to Congress and asked for that type of authorization. Is it good for Obama? I mean, I guess we'll know in 6 months what happens on the ground there, or maybe it'll be a year, or maybe we won't. But I think that it's better than if we were to continue on this path without any type of results.
Imogen, how do you assess both how the politics of this play for Obama? And in your own home country, David Cameron was among the first to release some of the assets to the new Transitional Council. How do you see this shaking out?
Well, first of all, quite interesting. We had a 6-hour debate in Parliament about Libya very early on, and David Cameron didn't need to do that. I am finding it very extraordinary that here in America, where actually he probably should have gone to Congress, Obama, he didn't. Political ramifications, I don't know. I mean, sort of one foreign policy success does not a Eurozone sort. There are massive problems at the moment facing especially Sarkozy and, of course, in the UK because of the Eurozone ramifications. So therefore, okay, this might be a sidebar of success, but really, fundamentally, there are so many big issues facing both Obama here and those European leaders at the moment. I don't know how it's going to affect them.
Sure, and yet, Tim, if Gaddafi, in some alternate universe, ended up emerging safe somehow, in control after 6 months or a year of NATO intervention, huge black eye for the West, right?
Which is
so you support President Obama and his undeclared war,
It's
right?
almost as if might makes right. In other words, it's almost as if winning a war makes it fine that it was illegal. This was a tweet out of one of your employers, Center for American Progress. Think Progress sent out a tweet that, oh, I wonder if John Boehner still thinks this war was illegal. Yes, it was still illegal, even if we had won. Now, of course, as your previous segment pointed out, winning in this sort of thing, even if we get rid of Gaddafi, there's still the occupation. This was an illegal war when it started, and it's an illegal war now that we drove Gaddafi out. And if we hadn't had success, then Obama would have gotten political blowback, which shows how little respect we really have for the rule of law.
Tony, I want to give you a nanosecond of a last word on this. Tim Carney says the ends do not justify the means. That's a breakthrough principle here on the Dylan Ratigan Show. Is he right?
Well, it's correct. I agree. No, I talked to Bruce Fein, a constitutional lawyer and scholar on this. The ends do not justify the means. This is an easy one. I mean, if we won, great. We could have gone in and asked for authorization and got it done. We didn't do that. This was an easy win for everybody. We chose to not do the right thing.
All right, Tony, thanks for sharing your insight on all of this. In other big news today, something that really drives me crazy, and it's getting lost, I think, in a lot of Libya development, which is that thanks to Bloomberg News, which put in a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, they got all the details on how the Federal Reserve actually did bail out the banks and did these emergency loans, which totaled $1.2 trillion back at the height of the financial crisis. I think we've got some of the statistics, but Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, which was not suspected to be in such dodgy shape, $107 billion in emergency loans, Citigroup $100 billion, Bank of America $91 billion. What's so outrageous about this is these are the institutions, let me start with you, Imogen, that in the U.S., these tend to be the capitalists who preach capitalism 364 days a year until the last day when it comes time for their bailout. These firms would have gone belly up if they didn't have a cash infusion at the time that all credit was drying up, because they fund themselves on this kind of wacky overnight basis that most folks don't understand. What do you make of this new revelation?
I mean, it really is quite extraordinary. I mean, I was hearing in the UK about how close we were to financial Armageddon. I knew someone who was in the room in the UK, as it were, when all these sorts of bailouts were being discussed. And we were very close. Moving forward, it's important to learn. Okay, so how do we regulate? How do we go moving forward? And yes, a whole load of regulations that came up last year, but they won't be enforced until 2015. We've got the problem with the pigs with Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. things are looking worrying. We've actually got to learn some lessons from the past here.
Sam, this will be a softball to you because I'm sure we agree on this, but it does seem like the bankers who were able to get, and they fought the disclosure of all this information, but who got such enormous liquidity, cash,
right,
provided by the federal government in ways that they didn't want to disclose. Well, obviously, millions and millions and millions of homeowners didn't have someone saying, we'll tide you over during your cash crisis. Where's the justice in this?
Well, I mean, it's
is that a softball enough?
Yeah, that's pretty softball. I mean, no, of course, there is no justice in this. And listen, we can debate the merits and whether somebody was in the room and whether or not it was justified. But at the end of the day, we should have had strings attached to this that make sure this isn't going to happen again. And now we have these banks that are bigger than too big to fail. And we have a situation. Even today, the New York Times reports that the Attorney General from New York is getting pressure from the Obama administration to stop investigating these banks and to simply settle for pennies on the dollar.
Jim, before I get you in, I want to put up, speaking of the strings attached that you talked about, a friend of the show named Barry Ritholtz, fantastic financial blogger, also writes a column for the Washington Post. He said any honest broker of the situation, looking back on what went on, would have imposed the following conditions for this big bailout. 1, fire the senior management of the banks. 2, ban all lobbying activity as a condition of any aid. Remember, they're now swarming Capitol Hill to make sure that all the capital requirements and other regulations coming out of this are toothless. And 3, forced a prepackaged bankruptcy. Barry actually said Swedish style, but I thought that was a little too Swedish for our show today. Instead, he says, we bailed out the bondholders and management, choking off hope for a robust recovery. Is he right?
He's right, and I would have not just made sure that those CEOs got fired. I wish that Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, anybody who needed these, I wish they didn't exist anymore. We could have government...
A radical position for a conservative.
Well, no. For someone who believes in the free market, it's a standard position. And the fact of the matter is that we saw from Congress that any liberals who were like anti-corporate in a foxhole, no. They were ready to save those big banks if they thought that was needed. And any conservatives who were pro-free market, again, under pressure, they were ready to bail out these big banks. And the question that we'll never have fully answered, but needs to be addressed, is were we saving the American financial system, like Ben Bernanke said, or were we saving a handful of big banks?
Well, and Imogen, that's the thing that still troubles me, is that there's a kind of insider culture. So much of the Obama administration in the early days and still now, staffed by folks who came from Wall Street, involved in Wall Street, with very close links to Wall Street. And I think that the view of the banks is that, well, look, you have to do this to save the system, and as if a byproduct of that, we retain $20 million annual bonuses while a lot of Americans are kind of going under. They feel that's okay. Isn't that a crazy disconnect?
It is absolutely crazy, and you just do wonder moving forward, why weren't more lessons learned? And it doesn't seem to be any changes at all that seem to have occurred.
Any last word on that?
Well, the most interesting thing today is that Tim Carney just signed off on that idea that we could regulate these banks. And frankly, that's, listen, I'm not in a position to judge whether or not we were at the brink of some type of Armageddon.
Sure.
But at the very least, if they're going to spend my tax dollars, I want to make sure it's not going to happen again, and we should have curtailed their ability to prevent it from happening.
And kudos to you, Tim, for a principled consistency about, if you're 4 markets 364 days of the year, you got to be 4 markets on the 365th, or at least say there has to be some accountability or some conditions on the kind of extraordinary, once-in-a-century relief. Just briefly.
Quickly, and liberals, if you're going to attack big business, you also have to not be handing them taxpayers' money while attacking them out of the other side.
I knew it would be liberals' fault somehow. The panel is going to stick around.
Always is.
Up next, Congressman John Larson, a man with a plan to bring jobs back by forcing Washington to get down to work.